The Great Question, The Origin of Life. The science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke said, "Two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying." Astronomer Danny Faulkner on the scientific view regarding origins of the universe.
Well, I don't think the scientific method can really tell you about the beginning of the universe. We can't go back in a time machine and replicate that. It's a theory or a model that people have put together about one possible origin. But see, when you're talking about past processes of history and origin, you're not really probing the past, you're probing the present and interpreting the past. The original conditions of the supposed Big Bang are pretty much unknown. You know, people have been trying to reconstitute some little tiny elements of that by high temperatures they can produce in particle accelerators. And we also have a problem with our theory. You push it back what's called the Planck time, back in the very early parts of the universe, our physics breaks down. It doesn't work anymore. We've got fantastic quantum mechanics that works. We have fantastic general relativity. But when you push it back to the high densities and high temperatures required by the initial Big Bang, our theories do not work. And if our theories break down, could it possibly suggest that maybe the universe doesn't have a naturalistic explanation? You cannot use the physics we have in order to explain these things. And I think this kind of takes it into the idea of a creator once again. If you push your physics to the point that they break down, maybe that's an indication that naturalism does not work.
So are we the result of chance or design? And what scientific evidence is there, if any? To begin, we need to ask a foundational question. What is science? According to the Science Council's definition of science, science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world, following a systematic methodology based on evidence. Professor Stephen Taylor, a professor in electrical engineering and a respected scientist who holds to a creation worldview, explains the importance of observation in science.
We've got to ask, what are the observable experiments that underpin that conclusion? We've got to force science in an observable, repeatable, keep science in an observable, repeatable mode rather than have it driven by speculation. So when I see things like evolution, when I hear things about the Big Bang and what happened 10 to the minus 43 seconds after the Big Bang, I say, where's the observable evidence for that? And of course, once we go away from the observable, we're into speculation, we're into philosophy, we're into religion. We mustn't allow that to happen.
The evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins said, "It would be so nice if those who oppose evolution would take a tiny bit of trouble to learn the merest rudiments of what it is they are opposing." Professor Andy McIntosh, a specialist in thermodynamics and a respected scientist who holds to a creation worldview, replies,
I would say to all of the evolutionary community, it would be so nice if those who oppose creation would listen to the experts in design engineering and take a tiny bit of trouble to learn the merest rudiments of what it is that they are opposing. Because whether it be Stephen Jay Gould, who's died now, whether it be Richard Dawkins, whether it be Steve Jones, who's one of the BBC advisors on issues to do with science and science teaching in the United Kingdom, whoever it is, I am saying let us have the science carefully put in front of students.
The subject of creation science within mainstream education has caused so much bitter controversy that there has been a concerted effort to keep the subject of intelligent design out of the science classroom. In 1982, a lawsuit in a US court of law resulted in Judge William Overton handing down a mandate that the teaching of creation science was unconstitutional because it violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment.
In my view, that closes down proper research, because that means that I'm not allowed to look at the possibility of design in clearly something which shows every evidence of engineering exquisite brilliance. So you're actually closing down the engineering mind from looking at that which is in nature. So that makes my scientific blood boil when people assert that you must by law not allow an intelligent design position or a creation position to at least be critically examined. We're not asking that it necessarily be adopted, but we are asking that critical thought be allowed into the scientific laboratory. If we close down critical thinking in our scientific laboratories, we close down science.
The atheist paleontologist and science writer Stephen Jay Gould put forward the view: creation science has not entered the curriculum for a reason so simple and so basic that we often forget to mention it, because it's false, and because good teachers understand why it's false. What could be more destructive than a bill forcing our honourable teachers to sully their sacred trust by granting equal treatment to a doctrine?
If design is the best explanation, it's the best explanation. And when I look at something like the cell, like the eye, like the ear, like the human body, like bone, like the heart, things that we can't make, things that you can't live without, things that have got design written all over them, why is it so wrong to conclude that they were designed? I'll give you the answer, by the way. The answer is, of course, why people do conclude that they're not designed, they won't allow intelligent design, is because they have a prior commitment to an atheistic materialism. Now that is unproven and unprovable. And atheism should not be allowed to drive science. It's a science stopper, in my view, because it rules out a priori. An explanation, which I would argue, is the best explanation. So we talk about keeping religion out of the science classroom. Well and good. Let's keep atheism out of the science classroom, shall we? And have a level playing field when it comes to the subject of origins.
Science and faith have no problem with each other if the faith is based on good, experimentally driven science. If you're basing your faith on philosophy, which hasn't been verified experimentally, then science and faith will not agree with each other. So if you base your faith on an evolutionary propositions which cannot be verified, then your faith will be destroyed by the actual evidence. It will only be propped up by people making dogmatic assertions based on their religious presuppositions. And that faith will not be supported by the real evidence.
The Darwinian theory proposes ever-evolving life forms where survival of the fittest ensures the continuation of the species.
Evolution requires blind faith. Evolution, in my view, requires you to believe it despite the evidence, right? The evolutionist constantly waves his magic wand and says, eventually we'll find the evidence. Abiogenesis, not a problem. Given enough time, we'll eventually find how we can produce life in the laboratory. When everything is telling an engineer who looks at that to say, actually, abiogenesis, getting life from non-life, getting DNA formed without having a programmer, everything is telling you that that is nonsense. You're never going to get it. Mud does not produce logical systems.
Imagine if a little amoeba, a single cell creature, wanted to develop an eye, for example. It needs a massive amount of information to be added on this amoeba to produce an eye or an ear or a skin or whatever. Now, in mutation is a faulty genes, is a faulty replication. So you can't have repeated faulty genes producing something positive at the end. So you need really added information. And where do we get the information? Information comes from a source of intelligence. Information doesn't come from material. Matter cannot produce information.
Science has to go where the evidence leads. And if the evidence is pointing to design, science has to accept that's where the evidence is pointing. To do otherwise and to say something like, well, it looks like design and it feels like design, but we know it can't be design because there is no designer, that is not scientific. That is being driven by atheistic dogma. And we have to go as scientists, we have to follow where the evidence leads, otherwise we cease to be scientists.
Evidence aside, from the perspective of the evolutionary viewpoint, we are faced with many philosophical questions. If life is here by chance, where does love, passion, hope, faith, vision and invention fit in? And where is the reason for one human to care for another, except perhaps where it's beneficial for selfish motive? In Section 3, we look further into the subject of intelligent design, an almighty creator.